Angel cloud appears over Ukraine. Will the Ukraine be okay? A Horary question by Gerard Kingsley.
G'day, welcome back to my channel. Please remember to like, share and subscribe. If you would like to book a consultation or attend a workshop, please go to my website, which will be in the banner above. This video was recorded on 18 March 2022 at 9:04 a.m. I was sitting and then suddenly I got an inspiration to do a horary question which popped into my head, and that is that will the Ukraine be okay? I normally don't get involved in political issues as I know nothing of anything political wise, but it struck a chord with me and it touched my heart, and I felt like I needed to give some guidance to those who are living in the Ukraine or those people who have family in the Ukraine. If you're watching this video on other social media platforms other than YouTube, this video would have probably been cropped into many different parts, so like part 1, part 2 and so forth, because most social media platforms have a limited time frame for each video, like 5 minutes. If you would like to watch this video uninterrupted without it being separated into different parts, please go to my YouTube channel, which is Archangel Astrology Numerology. Today is also the 1-year anniversary of my YouTube channel. I would just like to thank my subscribers and my followers as they have been loyal to me and watching my YouTube videos. My YouTube channel has just reached under 40,000 views, which I am tremendously grateful for, and my TikTok followers have now reached 4,500 followers. So I would just like to thank each one of you for following my YouTube channel, my TikTok channel, my Instagram, and my other social media platforms. Because without you, I wouldn't have a reason to make these videos. Please continue to support me so that I can continue making high quality content videos which will teach you all the in-depth steps of modern astrology and traditional astrology. My goal is to reach 1,500 YouTube subscribers and 150,000 TikTok followers, and the same for Instagram. So please share with your friends and family so that I can reach these goals. I wouldn't be able to reach it without you, so I ask nicely. Thank you very much. I wasn't planning on making this video because I had already scheduled, edited, and uploaded all my videos for the coming year. But this is such a heartbreaking situation, and I wanted to provide maybe some hope or some guidance or some clarity regarding the situation in the Ukraine, and just maybe answer a few questions by asking a horary question and then reading the chart. So none of this is my opinion. This is all what I see in the chart, and I remain objective. So I'm not choosing sides. I do, however, feel sorry for any country that is ever in war. I usually don't make videos based on divine inspiration. And what I mean by divine inspiration is like when you sitting and then all of a sudden it feels like you have a thought in your head which is not your own. So usually in my consultations I have divine inspiration, and then if I hear something or channel something, then I will share that with the person that I'm doing the consultation with, whether it is a loved one that has passed or whether it is something based on their future or something based on their past or something that they might have missed or something that I feel could be guiding to them. So this is the first time that I have actually done a video recording of something that was initiated by divine inspiration. So let's see how it goes. The first thing that I noticed when I looked at the horary chart, which was quite evident, was this complete red line opposition aspect between the sun and the moon. Now this is very troubling because it does indicate two parties are at odds with one another. And this is never a good sign because you kind of want the moon and the sun to be friends. You don't want them to be opponents to one another because they both are the luminaries, they both provide light. And then when they both provide light, it means that they both feel that they are right. The other problem that I noticed was that both the sun and the moon are on their last legs. Now what this means is that both the sun and the moon are in the last degrees of the houses that they occupy. Now this is never a good sign because what it means is that they are both like elderly people who are on death's doorstep. So that in itself kind of speaks volumes. Both of them are in Saturn's term, and that is not great either because Saturn is the greatest malefic. The other problem is that if they are in Saturn's term, it means that Saturn is like permeating through them and influencing how they behave and what they are doing and how they act and respond. It's almost like as if Saturn is the boss. And that is really not a good place to be in for any planet because Saturn is the greatest malefic, Mars is the secondary malefic. Malefic just means that they hardly ever have good intentions and they hardly ever have good behavior and responses to certain things. Seeing that no planets are situated in the first house, which is the most powerful house, it means that we have to look at where the second most powerful house is. And the second most powerful house in any chart is the 10th house. And Saturn is occupying the 10th house. Now, this is not great at all, and Mars is sitting right there as the secondary malefic with him. The two worst planets in the chart is sitting in the most powerful house in the chart, because the first house is unoccupied, it makes the 10th house the most powerful. It means that their power and their influence is incredibly strong. In this chart, Taurus is the rising sign, which means Venus is the ruling planet. Venus is situated right in the middle of the two greatest malefics. So this is a terrible situation for Venus because it means that she is in a place where she is literally has enemies on both sides. And this is not a great sign either because this means that firstly, that Venus probably doesn't just have Russia as an enemy. It probably means that she actually has a second enemy which could possibly be hidden. And the reason why I say that is because Mars, who sits with Saturn in the 10th, is also the ruler of the 7th house and of the 12th house. And what that means is the 7th house is the house of open enemies. The 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. So there might be an open enemy and a hidden enemy, or there might be an enemy that is semi-open and semi-unopen. And what that means is semi-known and semi-unknown. I don't know who that could be because I don't follow any political things. I don't listen to the news. I don't follow social media of anything that is negative because I get very depressed and very sad and paranoid when I do listen to the news. So it doesn't have any good impact on my psychology. And thank God, none of my family members listen to the news either. So I really don't have any feedback from anybody regarding what's happening in the world. Obviously, the Ukraine war situation is such a big thing that, I mean, you would have to live on an island not to know about it. Something that is very troubling and very difficult, and I speak from personal experience, is I have an incredibly strong Saturn chart. So I literally have only two planets that are not Saturn influenced in some way. The entire rest of my chart and all the planets are deposited by Saturn. And that is not a great situation. It's not as bad because Saturn is in its own sign in my first house in Capricorn. So it's semi on good behavior. So whenever a planet is preferably the rising sign, which in my case it isn't, but whenever a planet, a malefic planet, is the rising sign, it does create some hardships for the person who has that chart. So if you have a Capricorn, Aquarius, Scorpio, Aries rising sign, it does mean that your life might be slightly a bit harder and more difficult than other people. To give you an example, so for example, Saturn rules the homeless, it rules people who are poverty stricken, it rules people who are ill, it rules the elderly, It rules anybody who has had a difficult life in some way. So, what I'm getting to is that Saturn is very strong in President Zelensky's chart, which is the president of the Ukraine. Saturn is also incredibly strong in the Horary chart. Horary means question. So, this is not a great sign, and it's very relevant because Saturn is also the ruler of the Ukraine's chart because it's the rising sign ruler. So it means that the Horary chart, the natal chart of Zelensky, the natal chart of the birth of the Ukraine when it got its independence, are all three very strongly influenced by Saturn. It's not a great thing because what it means is that all these charts have recently undergone the Saturn return. And I speak from personal experience as well because I just came out of my Saturn return. So it's really not a great thing because it means that there was a lot of difficult tensions and things building up to this point. Because anybody who has gone through Saturn return will tell you that it's really usually not a very pleasant experience. It really forces you to transform, find your purpose, find what you're supposed to be doing in the world for the next 30 years. So it is really not a pleasant experience, even for someone like me who has Saturn in its own sign and it's quite okay and it's quite happy. It still wasn't very easy. So I can just imagine how bad it must be for people who has Saturn in debilitation or in full or in detriment. Because Saturn return has recently passed, it means probably that the situation with the Ukraine and Russia has, the Saturn return has actually escalated it in a way. So it's probably not the greatest thing. As mentioned before, Venus is literally between a rock and a hard place because she is sitting between Mars and she is sitting between Saturn. Now, this is a very difficult situation because she is occupying a space in Saturn's castle, and that means that Saturn is the landlord, Saturn is the king, Saturn makes the rules. She has to abide by all his whims and needs. Saturn believes that that space belongs to him anyway. So, same with Russia. Russia believes that that space belongs to him anyway, which is the Ukraine. So, as much as little Venus squirms and squeals, she's not going to get out of this situation very easily, especially because she's got enemies on both sides, Saturn and Mars. And I suspect that Saturn represents Russia because Venus represents, obviously, the rising sign. And the rising sign is always the person that you're asking the question about, or the person asking the question. Because she has these two malefics on either side, I really get the feeling that she's like almost in jail. She's being kept prisoner because she's not in a sign of dignity. This is actually quite ironic because Russia, if you listen to them, and the little bits that I've picked up here and there, is that Russia actually believes that Ukraine belongs to it and that Ukraine never deserved to get their independence in the first place. And as you've heard me say, I suspect that she has enemies on both sides, which means that I think at a later stage, Russia will get an ally that will fight with them if the Ukraine resists too much, or if third parties get involved like the West. What's interesting is that Russia is Saturn and Mars is also in Aquarius with Saturn. So I suspect that both these nations or enemies of the Ukraine will have high technology advances that the rest of the world might not be aware of. And that is not a good situation at all.
Every short video is one step closer to knowing yourself holistically. Focus on enhancing your positive traits and work on doing the opposite of your negative traits.
I must be honest, so far looking at the Horary chart, I don't see how the Ukraine is going to get out of this situation in a good shape. So I think the only way that they can make this work is if they give up or surrender. And I know that sounds terrible, but if they don't want people to die and they don't want to devastate their country, their economy, their wealth, their money, the only way to preserve all those assets is to give up and surrender. So, look, there is a little bit of hope in this chart because the 11th house is the house of friends and allies. And as you can see, the 11th house is quite fully occupied. So it's got 3 planets there. So what is looking optimistic is the fact that Jupiter is in its own sign, Pisces. The Sun is there and Mercury is there. So it does show that the Ukraine does have allies. And it does show that there are people who care, because remember, Pisces is a caring sign because it's a water sign. So this is good, but the problem is that, one, Mercury is in debility in Pisces. So it's in full in Pisces. This is not great at all. It means that the planets that are represented by Mercury are debilitated. They have no strength, they have no power. This is not good at all. It means that they can make a lot of noise because Mercury is a talkative, informative planet, so they can protest and things, but it's not really going to make a difference to the war situation. Russia isn't going to listen. The other problem is the Sun does not have any dignity in Pisces. And the problem is that Jupiter, the only planet that does have dignity in Pisces, is almost powerless because it's in a conjunction with the Sun. It's within 9 degrees of the Sun. And this is not good because it means that all the power that it did have is now taken away because no planet can outshine the Sun. The Sun is the brightest star in our solar system. And the Sun doesn't have dignity. So Mercury isn't in debility. It's not under the sunbeams like Jupiter is. But Jupiter is under the sunbeam, so it has no power. The Sun has no power because it's not in a sign of exaltation or rulership. So, okay, now what now? All the allies that Ukraine has don't have any power. So the little bit of glimmer of hope that Jupiter would have brought has now been stripped away by the Sun. So I don't see how this situation is going to end good for the Ukraine at all. The fact that all these planets are not really in any position of power simply means to me that they will try and be supportive, but they're not going to intervene because they're not going to put their own countries at risk and they're not going to put their own people at risk. And that is what I suspect this means. All these planets in the 11th house that have no power. When one looks at a horary chart, the rising sign ruler, in this case Venus, is the primary ruler of the chart. The secondary co-ruler is the moon, and thirdly, the sun. So as I said, both of them are on their last legs, and to make it even worse is the sun and the moon are both approaching the 2 most malefic houses in the chart, which is the 12th house is the worst by far, and then secondary worst is the 6th house. This is not a good sign at all. It means that both these planets sort of had some power, but now they are going to be weakened even more. Because according to the ancient sages and astrologers, they believed that when a planet is in an angular house, they have 100% power. When a planet is in a cadent house, they have 0 power. When a planet is in a succedent house, they have 50% power. So the angular houses are the 1st, the 10th, the 7th, and the 4th. The reason why I named them in that order is that is the order that they are said to have the most power. So the 4th house of all the angular houses have the least amount of power. The succedent houses are the 2nd, the 5th, the 9th, and the 11th. The cadent houses are the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 12th. But the 9th is not considered to be a bad house, nor is the 3rd. They are just weak. I was truly hoping for a more positive answer. I'm not done yet, but as I say, I was really hoping when I heard this question in my head, have some positivity and hope in it. Let's continue and see what it holds. So the sun is an old man. The moon is an elderly lady. They are both in Saturn's terms. So they are actually also semi under the dictatorship of Saturn, which is very ironic because Russia was the dictator and Ukraine was under Russia's dictatorship, from my understanding. So they're both in Saturn's term. Another very concerning factor is the fact that the seventh house is Scorpio. And the pot of fortune kind of sits between the sixth and the seventh house. Sixth house is definitely not good. The seventh house in this situation isn't good because it's ruled by Scorpio. According to the ancient sages, whenever the pot of fortune is situated in a bad position or bad house or bad sign, it really doesn't have any good in it. So it means that whenever you do an electional chart and the pot of fortune is situated in a bad placement or in a bad situation, you don't use the chart. You just do not use that electional chart because it will not bring any good. The other bad thing is that the pot of fortune is within a 4-degree orb of becoming a square with Mars. This does not look good at all. The other thing is that, remember, the pot of fortune sits in the house of Scorpio, who Mars is the ruler of. So Mars is not happy because he's not in his own sign. So he would have been on better behavior if he was in his own signs, Aries or Scorpio. But because he isn't, he's going to act like a spoiled brat and he's going to act out his worst natures. Not as bad as it would have been in detriment or fall, but it's still not good. The problem is that the seventh house is also the house of like partnerships. So the countries that the Ukraine would be in partnership with. Now the concerning part is that one, it's Scorpio. So whether they are by nature positive or trying to do good, or trying to be the golden eagle of the Scorpio nature, they might actually be doing more harm by supporting the Ukraine, and they should have probably just advised the Ukraine to give up. And the reason why I say that is because Scorpio's nature is that of they will terminate others and eventually themselves. So the more they are in the grey lizard, the snake nature, the more they will have negative tendencies. If they function as a golden eagle, because not all Scorpios are bad, so if they function as a golden eagle, then they will bring out the best qualities in a Scorpio. But because Scorpio's ruler isn't in a good sign, it isn't in a good place, it isn't under good influence, Saturn's influence, it's not going to be on good behavior. So I suspect that the countries that are going to try and help the Ukraine are actually just going to make the situation worse. So they're actually going to fuel the Ukraine's defenses, but in the process, it's going to lead to more pressure, more everything of Russia's anger, and it's going to make everything worse for the Ukraine. So in that, they are actually fueling the termination of the Ukraine and not really doing any good by giving the Ukraine ammunition, from what I've heard, and money to fuel the war, basically. So I cannot see how this is going to end good for the Ukraine when I look at this Horary chart. So when we are looking at the transit chart, this is what we see. Pluto is transiting the first house, the ascendant of the Ukraine. And if you know a little bit about astrology, you know that the ascendant represents the person and the person's identity, their physical body, and everything who and what they are composed of from a physical point of view, and everything that the world perceives, because it's also your mask. The challenge is that Pluto is showing death, rebirth, and transformation. Now, rebirth and transformation can obviously be interpreted as good, but if you think about it, if they are rebirth under the influence of Russia and they become under its dictatorship again, it's obviously not a good thing for the Ukraine. So rebirth can sometimes be bad. And unfortunately, it does show and indicate a lot of upheaval, bloodshed, trauma, psychological as well as physically. On the 18th of February, the full moon was conjunct the Ukraine's natal Mars, which is when everything started escalating. So this is not a good placement to begin with. This is also showing that it's not something that's just going to blow over. This is going to take a long time to resolve. The full moon is right on the natal Mars of the Ukraine, and when we interpret charts, if a chart is a night chart, which means that the sun is under the horizon, so it means it's either in the first all the way through to the sixth house. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Then it is a night chart. If the sun is in the 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th, it means that it is a day chart. The ninth house, so it is above the horizon, so it is a day chart, which means the worst planet in the chart is Mars. Mars is in Virgo, so it does not have dignity. So it's like a spoiled brat. Secondly, it's in the day part of the chart, which is not good because Mars is a night planet. It is not a day planet. Luckily for the Ukraine, it's in their natal chart. It is in the ninth house. So it doesn't have a lot of power. Unfortunately for them, Saturn is in their second house, which is not good because it sits on their resources, their money, their wealth, and it is at 1 degree, which is also not great. So it doesn't have dignity in that sense. So it is, however, in Aquarius, but once again, the rules of Horary and traditional astrology indicate that when a planet is in the first few degrees of a sign, its power lies in the sign behind it. When a planet is in the last degrees of a sign, it means that its power lies in the sign ahead of it. So in this case, its powers lie in Capricorn, which is fine because it's natural rulership house. So that's great. And currently it is occupying the house of Aquarius, where it also has rulership. So that's good. But the problem is that it's at 1 degree, which means it's like a 1-year-old baby. So it can't sit, it can't eat, it can't feed itself, it can't nourish itself. It is completely reliant on other people and things. Mars being very active in Putin's chart definitely indicates that it will fuel his initiatives to take over the Ukraine. The West aren't really going to do much according to this transit chart to help the Ukraine. On 28 March, there's a Venus-Saturn conjunction on the Ukraine's moon. It shows that towards the end of March, the Ukraine could receive some help from partnering nations. As Venus is a helpful planet, she brings people together rather than separating people like Saturn and Mars. Saturn conjunction with Venus, though, does in synastry charts and relationship charts indicate a long-lasting, loving relationship because Saturn rules long and lasting and Venus rules loving. So it usually is a good sign when there is in a synergy chart a Venus and Saturn trine, sextile, or conjunction. But all of them do bring their own challenges with and are kind of good and kind of bad aspects.
Subscribe to my videos so that I can assist you on your journey of self-discovery with the ultimate goal to help you realize your true potential and ultimately to achieve your life purpose.
This aspect also shows that the nations that will help will probably have had a long-lasting relationship with the Ukraine prior to the war. The moon is ruling the 7th house, which is once again, I mentioned the house of open enemies. So once again, it could actually lead to the detriment and downfall of the Ukraine. But it could also turn out positively. So let's see. The 7th house also rules combats and opponents because you are always the first house and everyone across from you is the 7th house. So whenever you are in a partnership, you are represented by the first house. Your partner is represented by the 7th house. And the 7th house could be business partners and long relationships. So like a marriage, for example. Of course, and trade agreements. 5 April, Mars and Saturn are on the Ukraine's moon. Oh my god. This is not good. This is really, really not good at all. This is really, really a bad aspect. This looks super bad. I can't sugarcoat things with this aspect. The moon rules the Ukraine's psychology, its emotions. It's like its second identity. Who you are at home is your moon sign. The planet Saturn of death, destruction, deterioration, conjoined with Mars, the planet of stabbings, explosions, bombs, knives, cuttings, war, destruction, conflict. This is not good. And it kind of does show that once again, because it's two planets, that there is a second party that cannot be trusted. On the 10th of March, the transiting Mars opposes the natal stellium of the Ukraine in Leo. This shows a lot of conflict and upheaval regarding what the Ukraine represents in itself and who they believe they are as people. Because whenever you have a stellium, it means that there's a large conjoining of planets conjoined together with one another in a house. So it almost becomes like a second identity or a third identity for the Ukraine, because the rising sign ruler is the primary ruler, which in this case, Saturn is the primary ruler of the Ukraine. I did pull the Horary chart long before I did pull the Ukraine's transiting chart, because I didn't want my opinions of the transiting chart and the natal chart of the Ukraine to influence what I was seeing in the Horary chart. The stellium in Leo does show that the Ukraine has the heart of a lion. So this is a good quality. I do want to say though that I have a stellium, and everybody that I've known that have stelliums, the stellium does influence your chart tremendously. And whenever there is a conjunction of a transiting planet with your stellium in your natal chart, or a square, or an opposition, it does present challenges. And it is very difficult, especially if, of course, if it's a malefic. If it's a positive planet like Jupiter or Venus, it's probably something good or great. Of course, the Leo stellium shows that they are an incredibly brave and strong country for such a small country. What I wanted to say earlier was that stelliums can be incredibly challenging, and I know quite a few people who have actually died when they had Saturn and Mars transiting or aspecting their natal stelliums. So it could cause death, and of course in this situation it has already caused death, because a lot of people in the Ukraine have already died. This really doesn't look good. I was really hoping for a glimmer of hope for the Ukraine when I saw this video of the angel in the clouds appearing. I really hope that I'm wrong in every single aspect of my reading of the natal chart and the transit chart. I would be very interested to know how other people would interpret this transiting chart. 16 April, Mars is opposing the Sun. This is really bad for the president of the Ukraine. The Sun is the leader of the nation. The Sun rules the 8th house of intelligence and death and taxes and transformation, sex. Obviously, most of those things are not relevant, but I would not be surprised if this war causes the death of Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, according to this transiting chart. there could be an intelligence breach. It could be that data or information is leaked to Russia or Russia's allies, which could lead to the detriment of the Ukraine. 30 April, Venus and Neptune opposes the natal Mars of the Ukraine, which means that they could get help from somewhere. But remember, Neptune is a planet of smoke and mirrors and deception and hypnosis and anything of the unconscious mind and pretending to be something that they're not. And remember, solar eclipses are never good. Solar eclipses are very destructive in nature, and from what I see, this looks like nuclear bombs, which is horrible. And remember, because of Neptune's nature, it can catch you off guard. You could not see it coming. 16 May, there's a lunar eclipse, which will happen exactly on the Ukraine's MC ruling the outside world, what the outside world sees, publicity, media. IC rules your home, your family, your roots, your parents, your home country, your foundation. The South Node, which is a bad planet, is conjunct the natal Pluto, which is a bad planet. Just for your knowledge, the North Node is considered to be a good in nature. The South Node conjunct Pluto indicates extreme mass loss, death, and destruction. Oh my god, this really continues to look even worse as I continue reading this chart. From mid-April to mid-May really looks bad, like a terrible time. On the 8th of August, there's a Mars North Node Uranus conjunction opposing the Ukraine's Pluto. This is when things could escalate, could get even worse. 11th of August, there's a full moon on the natal Saturn of the Ukraine. I really can't see how a small country like the Ukraine can stand up to Russia on their own, even population-wise, army size, everything, without the help of other nations. 25 October, there's a solar eclipse in Scorpio, indicating loss once again, squaring Saturn, the first house ruler of the Ukraine's chart, and Zelensky's chart. He is also ruled by Saturn because he's in Aquarius. This could be loss of a leader. It could mean that a new leader would need to take over, and that is once again why I say Zelensky might lose his life. This is really bad news. 8 November, there's a lunar eclipse in Taurus, and what's interesting for me is that I want to say this is obviously a bad thing, but the transiting chart is indicating a lot of the same, if not all of the same things that the Horary question that I asked indicated in that chart. And that is not good for the Ukraine. So I ask that if you have family or friends in the Ukraine, try and convince them to leave the country. Try and convince them to maybe come stay with you or whatever. Up to you. It's your choice. But try and get them gone. May God be with the Ukraine. God bless the people of the Ukraine. May their future be bright. I really hope so. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Please remember to follow me if you're on TikTok and Instagram and other social media platforms. Please share this video. Please create awareness. Please send it to people in the Ukraine, not to bring them down, but to warn them. And if the President Zelensky sees this video, I really do hope so, then your people love you, your people support you. I'm sure they will die for you. But I do think that this is not a good thing for you, your natal chart, and that this is not going to end good for you. And I don't think it's going to end good for you. I really hope I'm wrong, but I think somehow, some way, you must try and find a way out of this. I say again, please go to my website if you would like to attend a workshop or book a consultation with me. I love helping people. I love guiding people. I love helping people find their life purpose, helping people find closure, helping people for career guidance, family relationships, love relationships, child and parent relationships, baby planning. All these things are things that I'm passionate about and that I love doing for people and helping people with. God bless the Ukraine. Thank you. Have a good day. Until next time, goodbye.